The reason I came up with this, I've been in this position for 3 years. About 2 years ago, I was helping a independent school on the West Coast migrate their data and help them implement off a legacy system, which was a smaller entry-level commercial off-the-shelf system. And she was very pleased toward the end of the year when we finished up. And then she called me in January, sent me an email in January. She said, "Bob, Razor's Edge doesn't have a way to email the annual statements." And I said, "No, I'm sorry. They have to be ground mailed." I think all of us are excited that now you can email them out, and I want to show you how to do it. This is the first iteration I've gone through it. I probably will have questions I may not be able to answer. I think I've got a good understanding, but not a complete understanding on this process. So I'll share my screen with you. I'll show you the agenda. I've been around Blackbaud for a couple decades. I came up with a series in the beginning of the year. I have these monthly seminars. And so I meet with a lot of people at conferences and conference rooms or in their office. This is before COVID. And people would say, "I've heard about Blackbaud, and some people only use 50%. Of the people that were using Razor's Edge say they were only using 50%. And I think I understand that concept. So I thought, as I curate some topics for what I'd want to show with customers, what's the 50% I think is most valuable? I don't want to fool around with something that's obscure, that's only used by a few people or not that often. So hopefully my content resonates with each of you. The agenda is, I think everyone here knows who I am, so I might just skip or go through quickly my introduction. I think Lydia is the only person maybe that I don't know. Then we'll look at, we still have to look at older statements. I'll go through that quickly. I'm sure you've done this before. Maybe a couple of you haven't done older statements. So this is in January when we get our W-2s and 990s. Most of us send out these annual statements, and they're still going to have to be sent out to your constituents who you don't have email addresses for. So I'll briefly walk you through that, and then we'll get right into what I want to show you, which is the new statements in NXT. You can just email them out. And then we can move on to other things I thought might be important for you in end of year. Before you get to the end of year, like LYBUNTs and comparative report. I'm in Savannah, Georgia. Spent 17 years at Blackbaud, and I've been in this position for 3 years with Impact. It's a Blackbaud business partner. I'm going to send you this deck. I think I've got all of your emails. So by the end of the week, we'll have I got some help internally by wrapping up this recording into a nice presentation. Maybe I can figure out a way to take all my ums out of the presentation. I'll send it to you with this deck. I have had a similar presentation earlier this year, and I referenced IRS publication 1771. I put that in the appendix at the bottom of the slides that I'll send you. It's a link to that pub. And what it talks about is the requirements for gifts that single gifts that are $250 or above is what IRS requires you to send out I just mentioned that because I've seen a lot of organizations just send out annual statements regardless of the gift size. In this pub, I can reference this. It says that it gives it by example. Let's say someone's on a monthly giving program and it's $30 a year, which is $360 a year. That's not a single gift over $250. So in their example, you're not required to provide a statement. So I'm going to show you a query that helps weed out the $250 gifts from everybody else. So why don't we start there, and then I'll just go through that quickly, and then we'll look at the NXT statement. So back to our friend that's been with us for many years. We're going to look at query. So going down to database and looking at query. So I've got a query for all my constituents that have given a gift. I don't think I needed to use a criteria for last year because that's going to be filtered out once we look at statements. But do notice when I first set this up in January, I first set up as a gift query. It has to be a constituent query. And you'll see that on that slide. Because when you go to annual statements, it's going to ask you for a constituent query, not a gift query. Criteria is anything over 250. Any gifts over 250. last calendar year. I don't think it has to be last calendar year. I'm not 100% sure on that. And I'll put the name, gift amount, and the date, and we'll see. We have a few. You might remember this in sample databases. Robert Hernandez, or it used to be Michael Hernandez in the 90s. He's been around for a while. He shows up. I think I'm in there. A couple other people are in there. So here's all of the giving that's over $250. So what happens is, so I've got that set up. Now I'm going to plug that into, we're going to go to reports. It's not mail. We're going to go to reports, financial reports, and it's up near the top. Annual giving statement. Oh. So I've already plugged that query in here. We're going to filter on last year. That's why I don't think that criteria on tab 1 is necessary. We're going to filter it out on last year. Let me show you this. Normally, oftentimes when I'm providing instruction in database view, I skip over all the middle tabs here, but this one may be important for you. So this is selected all the defaults, but you can play around with it. So when we get to Robert Hernandez's record, what you're going to see by default is, in addition to the $250 gifts and above, he's got a 50,000, a couple fives and others. All the giving is going to show up. So if he qualifies with one gift, all the gifts going to show up. And there's a couple of monthly recurring gifts in there. So you can filter that off if you want to. By default, it's there. He has a planned gift for that last calendar year. We got a lot of information for Hernandez. It's not going to show up on his giving statement, but there is one. I can't think of a reason why he put a planned gift on a giving statement. You know, it's not a realized planned gift. I've got two screens that's running on the other screen. So we've got 8 records, I think. So Dean, just one gift. Richard, one gift. And Hernandez, all of his gifts. So if he qualified for one, by default, what Razor's Edge does is it prints the statement out for everything. I would think I'd probably want to take the recurring out. I don't know how you feel about that, but you know how to do that now on tab 3. So that's what we've had in Razor's Edge for over 20 years. It's pretty tried and true. This isn't broken. It's pretty, I think it's error free. You got what you got here. Yeah, you can put some formatting on tab 8, do a heading, do a footer, clean it up, put some colors on there if you want to. So that's what you got for the constituents that you're still going to need to run for the ones who you don't have email addresses for. In the equivalent for query in NXT is called lists. It's been around for 7 years. I think it's quite good. I think it's robust. I think Blackbaud did a good job of putting the primary fields that you need in lists to filter on and create the columns for, but it's limited. It doesn't have everything. And one of the things that could be helpful here is to have phone number, which is email address. So you can't create this list. You can't create the list that you need to run annual statements or giving statements in NXT without first doing it in database view. So back to query. And so I updated the 250 list with emails on tab 1 on the criteria. Now you're going to probably have many different email types in your system. In this sample database, there's probably 8. I just chose one. I just chose email, the one that comes out of the box. When you first got Razor's Edge, there's going to be an email type. I think it's email 1, email 1, email 2. That's what gets you started. And then you've got your own flavors. You've got work and business and all your other types. For my criteria, I just chose email, just one of them, not blank. I guess I'm still keeping the calendar year, and the other criteria is going to be 250. What you're going to see is duplicates, because back to our Hernandez record, he's got several emails, but it's only going to be counting 2 individual unique constituent records when we pass this static query over to NXT. Remember, for those of you that have played enough into NXT now, when you create a new list, it's going to ask you, do you want to create a new one, open an existing, or open one that was static It was a static query created in database view and you're passing it through NXT. So when you pass this query through, only 2 records will show up. So it's just going to be Maria and Robert. There won't be duplicates. And everyone probably knows this, but just to mention in case you don't, the reason it's going to be static is you can't pass through into NXT the query statement. You're just passing through the record IDs. So it comes through in lists. It's still a constituent list. And notice it's just 2 people. It's just Maria and Robert. So that query that looked like multiples because of duplicates, and the duplicates was because there was more than 1 email address, distilled down to just 2 succinct people. That's our list. Now we're going to go to, and you'll see this in the deck, so I've annotated all the steps. We're going to go to, off the omnibar, off the main menu, we're going to go to fundraising, giving statements. We could do this for a single person. You can imagine how this might be used. Someone calls you in January or February, whenever, and they say, can you send me an email statement? Can you email it to me? You can do it right there. Off of that button. This one, we're going to pull up that list that we passed through from database view. And then send it. See what an example looks like. Sorry, you're looking at my email. Right here. So the sample database is called Impact. Detail for the gifts, and then a summary down below for fund totals. You know what? I can send this to you, everyone, if you want. You can see what it's going to look like before you run it on your own. I just updated my work email on Hernandez's record. That's how it got to me. And that's it. I started practicing on this last week. I sent out a few. What was this last Friday. So it creates a PDF and you can download those PDFs. I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't want to. I think this is obvious. Failed statements, perhaps they're bounce backs. I don't know. This is where you build your list. And that's it. So right off the main menu, fundraising, giving statements, to build your list first. You're going to need to figure out which ones have emails first. So I guess you'd call it splitting the deck. That's what I would say. You've got all of your donors that meet the criteria you want. My criteria is any single gift over $250. You get those without emails. You're going to do it the old way, where it's going to be sending out the letters. One thing I always mention, I'm sure everyone knows this. When you send out anything in mail, particularly in mail, on tab 1, there's a checkbox on the bottom left. It says create a query. I annotated this on the deck. I wanted to. Where am I? Under reports, financial reports, and the annual statements. So again, back to the records that you don't have email addresses for. You're going to preview this, make sure it looks okay, and then send it to the printer. I would suggest clicking here, creating a query of type constituent, and then using that constituent, name it something that is relevant to what's going on here. And then go over to mail, go over to mail, and then print out either your envelopes or your labels, and it'll print out in the same order that these are, so you can match the statements with your envelopes or labels. All right, we're going to leave our old friend a database view for a while, go back to NXT. For those of you who've been using it, database view for a while, you go to analytical reports. There's the LYBUNT report, last year, but unfortunately not this year. It's still there. I tend to recommend to customers, let's make it easy. I think it's a lot better. Let's go to fundraising and reporting, and we'll see many different tabs. The last tab that you touched on is where it's going to land again. The first time you go in here, it's going to be in the leftmost tab on the overview tab. I don't know why overview's not over here. What we're looking at here is retention. Probably a good thing to run probably last week, the first week in December, is particularly if you own a portfolio of constituents. Who are the people that are lapsing? I'm just here on retention, comes up with some data, this dashboard here. So I want to look at my LYBUNTs. This is probably a low number. You could run it on your own people if you want, filter by different things. So here are my LYBUNTs. That surfaces that number. You don't have to fool around with going through different tabs like you used to have to do in database view. And now you've got your list of LYBUNTs. For those of you that run this before, you know what you can do with this. You can click here and export it. You tend to get a little bit more columns than you like, but you get quite a few more columns that you're going to see here surfacing here, and then clean it up. And then this is a pretty easy number. If I was a major gift officer on your team, I could probably go through this in the morning, start at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and by noon, I've contacted all my LYBUNTs to see if I can re-engage them. This is not big news to you. I'm sure you're all focusing on LYBUNTs, but here's an example of what might happen. Let's say I'm associated with your organization and I'm a mid-level donor. Perhaps I'm a parent, I'm an alum, I've got a small business, and I normally provide I would say 10, maybe $1,000 to $5,000 gift a year. And if you're an MGO and you've got me on your portfolio, you're probably keenly aware of where my giving is throughout the year. But for those of you that have larger lists or that don't have portfolios at all, and someone like me might slip through the crack on the LYBUNT, here's what might happen. Last year in 2021, I made a $1,000 gift to your organization. This year, I get invited to an event, and it was just a simple event in July, and I paid $50 to go to the event. I'm not going to show up on the LYBUNT because I gave again this year, but that doesn't match my capacity in my years of giving. Many of you might know this already, but there's a report in analytical called comparative report. What you do on the first tab is you come up with the columns of the years on general. So I just chose last year and this year. I'm not looking at fiscal years. I'm just looking at calendar years, this year versus last year. And then I want to look at, I'm going to jump over like I normally do to, sorry, where am I? I was going to go to tab 7. Yes. On tab 7 on format, I went down to detail. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for those donors that decreased by a certain dollar amount or percentage. I just chose percentage. So now back to the example of small portfolios. Like in my sample database, I just have 21 people, I think. Some of you may have 80 or more, or you might not have any portfolios. You just have a whole group of people. You want to be able to catch the people who gave a certain amount last year, but this year it went down by, pick a number. You can play with this and keep on running it till you get the right number you want. So we'll find 3 people. I happen to be one in the sample database that didn't perform like I did in the prior year. I've got it. Let's get the slide over. I sorted it intentionally so we're not fooling around with the $0 ones. It's 100% variance. I just want to look at these ones where here's 1,000 and only 50 for this year. Maria, 26,000, only 95. And then Robert, you can see. So what I want to do is surface to the top these people that gave in 21, but didn't get close to where they were in the prior year. And we find that in comparative reports. I think that's helpful. Possibly a couple other things you might be looking at the end of the year. You might be looking at top donors or donor categories. They're found here. Donor categories, you just go into only database view. You go into config, tables, alphabetically down to the Ds. And so you find donor category. Blackbaud offers 3 different categories. So you just build in your levels. Might have already done that already. So 0 to 1 to $99 are your friend. Your supporters are something to 1,000. You see this, and you can do it by. I've seen customers do this by donor categories, by events, or just by annual giving, or by different criteria. So you've got donor categories that you might run by year. Sometimes you might do a fiscal year. Top donors is also here. These are a couple of things that aren't in NXT yet, that you only find in database view in analytical reports. The final thing I want to tell you about before we finish is what I like and what I think helped me with my first closing my first $1 million gift is birthday cards. So back to my favorite part, I could spend hours talking about Work Center in NXT. So back on the main menu on the Omni bar, fundraising, work. I probably would have called it Work Center. Here's work. And we'll filter out myself as a fundraiser. So we'll get a look at, oh, I only have 15. So we got tags here, and these tags could list on birthdays. But at the end of the year, what I was thinking about is if we look at my 15 or 65 or 115 people in my portfolio, in the morning between cups of coffee, I could probably send holiday cards to the people in my portfolio. To start here, name and address, name and address, name and address. I was just trying to think of if I were a major gift officer, mid-level officer, annual giving person in your office, how would I use Razor's Edge at the end of the year? And that's what I'd probably do. Oh, one last thing. There's always one last thing. I never like to leave a presentation without providing Bob's tip of the day. And I thought about showing you something that's in NXT. So we stay in NXT. I think a lot of people tend to like presentations in NXT. In database view, you might know this. It's in config and then business rules. You have a few business rules. I'll show what happens to deceased donors in business rules in database view. You'll find that here in control panel settings. Right here, deceased constituents. It doesn't have as many questions as business rules. I would probably edit one thing though. I'd probably ask to be notified about marital status. So probably choose do not mail, set an end for the constituent date, mark spouse, and I'd probably update marital status too. In database view, that also asks you if you want to change the citation, which I think is a good thing to do. All right. 26 minutes after the hour. That's all I've got. What questions do we have?
Bob, we had a good question from Kimberly, and she asked, can you run the annual statements as a PDF and look at them before you send them as an email?
Maybe you can export as a PDF.
The answer is yeah. You can. So if you go back into NXT, Bob, when you generate your statements, you can select to print instead of email in WebView.
Oh, WebView. Annual statements. I'm with you now.
So that format right there, instead of email, you can pick print, I think is the other option.
Did I have to do that before I got
PDF
here?
is the option on format there.
Oh, here.
You're right. You're right. Go back. No, go back to generate statements. And then that format drop down, that third option down.
Yes. Yeah, I'm following you.
I'm just thinking I might want to look at it, and it actually sort of leads into the other question that just popped up in the chat, is that, I want to take a look and see what it looks like before I send it out, because what's happening is it's just going to appear in their inbox and there's no context to it. And you don't have the ability to add context to the statement. So, I'm thinking geez, do I need to send everyone an email to say, I'm going to send you a separate email with this information?
Yeah, something um, in the header line at the top, so they know this is your annual statement.
Yeah, and if you click on that gear up in the upper right, Bob, you can, these are the options that you can add to your giving statement. So there's very little that you can do to customize it. But you can view what it looks like there under that link that says view default email example.
This is show up like a list, right? Shouldn't I be able to download this?
Yeah, it should download as a PDF.
It can take a moment to process.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have that link there underneath action, that first one you ran on December 9th. You can download them. That might be able to get you quicker, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a zip. I guess they're all going to be zip files.
That at least gives us an idea of what we can do is maybe just get a small query, create the PDF statements, and then take a look at it and then see what we need to or can adjust. There it is.
Yeah. Yeah, here's that unzip. So I've got a few.
What I've seen some organizations do is send out an email first to the same list that way you can customize the message a little better and say, hey, just be prepared. You're going to be receiving, your PDF annual statement from us. And that way you can include a thank you as well and use it more of a stewardship piece and include pictures and whatever else you want to do in that email first, and then send out kind of the annual statement as a separate piece, because you're really limited on the message that you can include with these statements here.
And here. I guess the biggest impact of making a change is here on the subject line. I don't know what it would have here, maybe 80 characters. Add something else. Kim, how many do you normally have per year? Are you sending out just your 250s and above?
No, actually, what I like to do is we do have recurring donors, and sometimes they don't know what the total was for the year, or there may have been another gift in there. So I actually like to send a summary to anyone who was a recurring donor. And then I also, I realize that the requirement is only for a single gift of 250 or more, but I might look at a summary of giving of 250 or more and send them a statement.
Yeah.
So it could be several hundred.
All right. Anything else? Anything from St. Paul? Corpus Christi?
I just had a question about, how she was talking about, to personalize, like what they did last year was they exported everything into Word, because we do have, even though there's a head of household, but like we go by whoever sent us the money, the billing info, right? So even if the husband and wife are each constituents, they will still get both, we'll send them just both to the one mailing, right? But they'll get both statements that the husband or wife, whoever cut the check or used their card or whatever, right? But at the bottom of the statement, what they did is they exported everything into Word, and they added a statement at the bottom, like a footer statement, you know, Del Mar College Foundation, EIN, blah, blah, blah. And it was just kind of our generalized, you know, because they do give something that we call a designated scholarship, and those, they are a receipt of zero. So, you know, they have to, it's kind of basically releasing our liability. Like, you know, you need to contact your tax advisor for how this is going to be reported. It's a very generic statement, right? Just kind of like, you know, always seek advice when doing your taxes. So I'm wondering if there is a way in the format tab to add that somewhere. That way, when it does export out, it's less hassle for us, because we do have, like, we will go through each individual statement, which I'm trying to streamline that, because I feel like it could be better, it could be faster to do that, because they didn't do email. They just did everything standard mail is when they did it last year. Because I got here, I started right after they printed all the statements. So I was helping them stuff all the envelopes. I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this, especially because they were dealing with the labels and envelopes and all this stuff. And so I'm glad to know that I can pull that query over to make it a little easier to print and keep it in order. But yeah, it's, you know, they still go through every single statement, because maybe they're not going to send to some of these orgs that, even though they gave $5,000, but it was a designated scholarship that's not, you know, it's also, we do get donor advice funds that send us money, but they've already been receipted through other ones, but they're still also giving as a constituent. And so, you know, it just gets kind of messy. So they still kind of want us to review them each individually, but it's just more of us, trying to make it as easy and streamlined as possible to use the technology to my advantage and not to hinder me. Right. So I'm just wondering if there's any tips or tricks. And, you know, I like the idea of, you know, sending if we do decide to try out the email statements for certain donors, you know, hey, this is upcoming, you should receive them by the end of this date, you know, by the end of January 31st or whatever the date we send is, to expect that from us, to add us to the safe list, right? But and then we could personalize it and add the statement there. As always, please, you know, seek advice for your taxes or whatever. But you know, I'm just trying to find a way, because I guarantee you my director is going to ask me all these questions. So I'm just trying to have the answers ready to go for him.
Yeah, this export is done through annual statements in the where I started.
On the reports.
Yeah. And the reason you're doing that is to customize it more, so it's not out of the box looking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll probably play with it with just like a single record with like my record, and just kind of see how, and then I can pull an actual query with our criteria. But especially like Miss Kimberly said, same thing. We have these constituents that send us recurring gifts of $10, but or $20, whatever it is for the year. So they will hit 250 or more total giving, just not an individual gift. So you know, we have to just be on the lookout for those things as well.
And then see on tab 7, there's a header.
Yes.
Probably the second one down on tab 7. You can customize it. I think there's also a footer. A footer will help you.
Okay.
And then you don't have to mess with exporting if you can do it all within the standard statement tool.
Yeah, I think the other problem with that in database view, though, is it only exports as a PDF, I believe. So that's part of the issue. The other thing that we end up dealing with is we try to get all of the giving on one record, the head of household, but invariably there's something that happens where there's giving on both records. And, you know, one of them will get the statement and they'll say, well, this doesn't reflect everything. And so, you know, we're trying to remember, you know, that Stacy Rutledge and Ed Gray are married, and they give differently and separately, but what if, you know, she didn't qualify because she made just one gift of $150 and
Yes, we've run into, like I said, we do have constituents, because one may be a board of regent, one's an alumnus or something. And so they are marked as head of household. Usually it's the male, but sometimes the woman is marked as head of household. But that's kind of what we run into as well, is that they don't share the last name. So what I've suggested that we've done, or that we do this time around, because they were just kind of going back and forth, is pull it into an Excel from the query and sort by address to see who's at the same address, to help us with that mailer. So at least we know when we come across these two names, okay, they're going to go together. Because yes, we do have plenty, one may have been a doctor prior to getting married, but they kept their practicing name, so we do run into those kinds of unique situations.
I do definitely think I'm going to try to email the statements from NXT this year, though, those that I can.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I would like to do a trial run in-house, just with like the staff, or at least our fundraisers that are marked as solicitors in the database, and I can just pull query that way. But I definitely would like to test run this and see how it can be customized, and if it will meet our standards of how we send out our statements.
Well, Cecilia, if NPAC can be any help in the future and get closer, just let us know.